The Persona Dancing games are a strange anomaly. They're among some of the most infamous games to come out of the great Persona spin-off era for a myriad of reasons. For those who are unaware, the Persona Dancing Trilogy is a series of rhythm games where the main appeal is to watch your favorite characters dance to funky remixes of tunes from the respective games. While it's easy to point and laugh at what they ended up becoming, the concept of a Persona-themed rhythm game actually makes a lot of sense when you really think about it. The series is well known for its catchy music, and since Atlus already showed interest in expanding the Persona franchise beyond RPGs thanks to the Arena games, I figure they thought, hey, why not, and greenlit the project. Persona 4 Dancing All Night was originally released for the PlayStation Vita back in 2015, but would eventually receive a remaster for the PlayStation 4 a few years later. This version of the game has better texture quality, runs at a higher resolution, has better performance, and is overall just the best way to play Dancing All Night. The only issue is getting your hands on it. For some reason or another, the PS4 version of Dancing All Night is only available as a bonus for purchasing the Persona Dancing Endless Night collection. It retailed for about $100 US at launch and came with all 3 games and a few pieces of DLC. And since there's no physical release of this remaster, if you want to play Dancing All Night nowadays, it has to be through this collection. This is a very scummy business decision. You're essentially forced to buy 2 games that you either already own or might not be interested in just to get Persona 4 Dancing. While this collection does go on sale often, it doesn't excuse the greed motivating the practice. And that's not even getting into the fragility of digital-only content, but that's a discussion for another time. Just like with the Arena games, I'm going to be covering all of the dancing games in one video, since at their core, they're fundamentally the same gameplay-wise. Of course, some differences set them apart from each other, and I'll be highlighting them when appropriate, but it isn't enough to justify giving each game separate videos. The last thing that I want to mention is that there are going to be spoilers for all 3 dancing games in this video. This warning more so applies to Persona 4 Dancing, since that game has a surprisingly fleshed out single-player campaign. P3 and P5 Dancing also technically have a story, but it's very minimal. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. With all that said and done, let's get started. Dancing All Night's story takes place about 1 month after the epilogue of Persona 4 Golden. Rise has recently gone back to the idol industry and is going to make her grand reappearance at the upcoming Love Meets Bond's music festival. However, she's not fully confident in her abilities and requests the help of the investigation team to support her as backup dancers. During the first day of rehearsals, Narukami and Naoto meet a girl named Kanami Mishita, a character that played a pretty large part in Rise's social link in Persona 4 if you remember. We're also introduced to her idol group Kanami Kitchen and her manager Miss Ochimizu. Lately, a strange rumor has spread involving a video depicting a dead idol showing up at midnight on the LMB website, and the next day we learn that the members of Kanami Kitchen have mysteriously gone missing. Thinking that this is too much of a coincidence, Rise, Naoto, and Narukami watch the video themselves and are sucked into the midnight stage, an area not too dissimilar to the TV world. The trio discovers a mysterious entity using these yellow ribbons and an eerie song to brainwash people into forming bonds with it. The group is unable to use violence to defend themselves, but they accidentally discover that through the power of song and dance, they'll be able to fight back against the voice's control and summon their personas, which gives them enough time to escape back to the real world. The investigation team meets up the following day where they theorize that the missing members of Kanami Kitchen are located somewhere inside the midnight stage. Kanami is also almost dragged into the midnight stage, but is saved by Miss Ochimizu at the last second, who ends up getting captured herself. With no one else to rely on, it's up to the investigation team to enter the midnight stage, find the missing members of Kanami Kitchen, rescue Miss Ochimizu, and get to the bottom of this new mystery. That's the basic setup to Persona 4 Dancing All Night, and while it's simple on paper, there's no denying what it is. A ridiculous premise that's innate absurdity can be seen as too distracting to take seriously. To that extent, I can agree. It's very easy to dismiss the story simply because of its foundation. However, if we were to go beyond the surface level and look at the actual narrative that's being told, then it's actually kind of good. Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect story by any stretch. It suffers from a few of the same problems as the Arena games do, but Persona 4's core themes of identity and self-acceptance are well represented in its new characters. For example, the members of Kanami Kitchen all have very similar insecurities. Whenever we come across a member of the group inside of the midnight stage, their personalities are far different from how they were initially presented. The main conflict with these characters is the internal struggle between living as their true selves or completely submerging themselves in their idol personas. Each one of them has a deep-rooted fear that if they're unable to live up to the expectations set by their fans, then they'll be abandoned by them. What the members of Kanami Kitchen desire are to abandon their true selves and fully embrace what the public wants them to be. This in turn would allow them to obtain the bonds that they so desperately want without having to worry about being rejected or ridiculed because of their quirks. Miss Ochimizu is also used to illustrate this idea. For most of the game, she's portrayed as a very cruel and stern manager that strives for perfection. She often acts cold and looks down on others, especially Rise. However, it's eventually revealed that this attitude is actually a facade. Ochimizu used to be a far more caring and supportive person while she was managing the young idol Yuko Osada. The two of them had a very close relationship. However, Yuko hated her job as an idol because she felt as though no one could truly understand her. She desperately wanted to break free from her manufactured idol personality and let the real Yuko express herself, though she couldn't find the courage to do so and fell into a deep depression. She would eventually end up taking her own life, and Miss Ochimizu believes herself to be responsible for what happened. This led her to believe that expressing your true self around others was an impossibility, and that idols would be better off shaping themselves around what the public desired. Miss Ochimizu was villainized by the public and was seen as a cruel person, but rather than fight back against it, she decided to become what the audience saw her as, using the infamy to help push Kaname Kitchen into the limelight in order to help carry out Yuko's legacy. And finally, there's Kaname herself, who struggles with feelings of isolation. She feels unfulfilled with the bond she has with her audience, since they don't care about her as an individual. Rather, they love the idol personality that's being fed to the public. However, that's not all that's going on with this character. As it turns out, she does have a connection to the events surrounding the idol Yuko. When Kaname was young, she looked up to Yuko and strived to be just like her, but after auditioning to become an idol herself, Kaname witnessed Yuko's suicide and was traumatized by this event. Kaname ended up suppressing these memories in order to preserve the image of Yuko that she built up. Her desperation to form bonds with others as an idol while forgetting the pain Yuko went through eventually manifests as the game's major antagonist. While at first, it seems as though Kaname's shadow is the one pulling the strings, but it's quickly revealed that the true culprit is the deity Mikurutana no Kami. She represents humanity's desire for easy bonds with others, and she plans on using the Midnight Stage to brainwash all of mankind into becoming the selves that others want them to be, essentially trading away freedom and identity for the sake of painless connections. The investigation team disagrees with this philosophy due to their personal experiences, and rise up to demonstrate the power of true bonds. At its core, Persona 4 Dancing All Night shares the same values as the original game, but it puts a much larger emphasis on the idea of bonds. The narrative is about learning to have confidence in who you are and not to twist yourself into someone you're not for the sake of appeasing others. While this would be an easy way to form bonds, they're ultimately hollow since they lack any personal connection. At that point, you're less of an individual and more so a puppet that puts on a show tailor-made to appease as many people as possible. When taking all of this into account, it's actually a fitting narrative for this kind of game. Something that I appreciate about the story is that they acknowledge dancing as a form of expression. Every character in the game has a unique way of moving. Their styles match well with their established personalities, which goes a long way in selling that these characters fully embrace who they are as individuals. The final dance even goes the extra mile to incorporate every member of the investigation team into the choreography, not just for the sake of being an impressive finale, but also to demonstrate the bonds that they all share. Yeah, it's very cheesy, but it's executed with such earnesty that I can't help but get swept up in the whole thing. When looking at the plot of Dancing All Night on paper, it's quite interesting. However, much like the arena games, where the narrative falls flat is in its storytelling, mainly the pacing of the writing and how repetitious it is. This is quite a chatty game, and characters are very much prone to going on inner monologues that don't mean much to the overall narrative. The worst example of this is chapters 2 and 3. These two chapters see the investigation team searching for members of Kaname Kitchen, all the while they try to deduce who the culprit is and what they're trying to accomplish. You'll quickly realize that these chapters follow a very similar formula that is repeated 4 times. The characters fight some shadows, come across one of the idols who's then kidnapped by the culprit, the group then fights the idol's shadow before moving on to the next one. This, combined with the walls of text you're forced to read in between every song, makes these chapters very draining to experience. And that's the best way to describe the whole of Persona 4 Dancing's story. It's draining. The campaign is about 10 to 12 hours long, which is pretty beefy for this kind of game. The issue is that there isn't enough story content to fully justify its length. There's a lot of filler in the dialogue that feels as though was included for the sake of having the story mode reach a certain runtime. I'm mainly referring to the constant use of inner monologues. I had the same issue with the arena games, and it's worse here. These add absolutely nothing to the narrative, and if they were removed, the pacing would flow much more naturally. It also doesn't help that the general presentation of the story mode is lackluster. I will say that the visual novel format is more justifiable here since the game was originally developed for a handheld, but I can only cut it so much slack. As a whole, the story mode of Dancing All Night is just fine. On paper, the plot has a lot of potential, and feels very in line with what I expected of the series thematically. It's just that the execution of these ideas end up falling a bit flat for me because the storytelling isn't up to par. I can appreciate the ambition and the ideas behind the narrative, but it's not enough for me to want to experience it again anytime soon. While the story isn't exactly great, the gameplay on the other hand more than makes up for it. If you're familiar with rhythm games at all, then you'll be right at home here. Mechanically speaking, things are very simplistic. There are 4 different kinds of notes for you to hit. There's the standard tap note that requires you to hit the corresponding button with the proper timing, notes that require you to hold the button for a specific duration, notes that require you to hit buttons on the opposite ends of the controller, and finally there are scratch notes, which require you to either rotate the analog stick or press one of the shoulder buttons to hit. Unlike regular notes, you're not punished for missing scratch notes, but they are required to hit if you want to get the best possible rank. Something to keep in mind is the current mood of the audience. If you miss too many notes and the meter falls below a certain threshold, you'll fail the song. It essentially acts as your health bar, but the chances of you failing aren't exactly high. But on the flip side, you're rewarded for putting on a good performance. By maintaining a high audience rating while also hitting special scratch notes, you'll enter Fever Time. During Fever Time, your score will be multiplied, the audience rating won't decrease, and you'll temporarily be joined by a partner. While just finishing a song is easy enough, the real challenge in replayability stems from trying to earn the rank of King Crazy. This rank can be earned by maintaining a combo throughout the entirety of a song. Combos only count whenever you hit notes with either great or perfect timing. Anything lower will break the combo. This is a simple enough rule. However, I think the game could have done a better job at conveying whenever you earned a good rating. I mention this because one of the benefits of Fever Time is the ability to keep your combo streak going even if your timing is slightly off. This ended up causing me more harm than good because I wasn't able to immediately tell when I messed up. This meant whenever I finished the song, I'd get the full combo bonus, but I wouldn't receive the King Crazy rank. This is a quirk that's shared between all 3 dancing games, which is strange because there's an obvious solution to this problem. If I had it my way, I would remove Fever Time's combo protection, so good ratings will always break combos no matter the circumstance. Since earning a King Crazy already requires you to full combo a song, I think that having the full combo bonus is a bit redundant. All this would do is save time, because there's nothing fucking worse than thinking you King Crazy'd a song only for it to be ripped away because of one good rating you didn't even notice.
Yeah.
When it comes to the main mechanics, that's honestly all you need to know. The game is very simple at its core, but for a rhythm game, that's perfectly fine. Where the real enjoyment lies in Persona 4 Dancing is the design and content surrounding the gameplay. Outside of the story mode, you're mostly going to be spending your time in free play mode. This allows you to play any of your unlocked tracks at any difficulty. You can even dress up the characters in different outfits and accessories, and turn on any gameplay modifiers you have unlocked. All of this is acquired through the in-game shop. You earn cash at the end of every song, which can be used in the store, and your payout varies depending on your rank, difficulty, and number of modifiers you have turned on. I think that this is a great way to encourage players to improve at the game, since the better you perform, the more money you earn. Money that you then use to get cosmetics for your favorite characters, or buy even more difficulty modifiers to add some gameplay variety. Part of me wishes that items in the shop costed a bit more money, however, since once you really start to get to grips with the game, you're already close to owning everything. Either that or some extra outfits and accessories would have been appreciated. By purchasing all the items in the shop, you unlock the game's hardest difficulty titled All Night Mode. While it may look a bit intimidating at first, it's honestly my favorite way to play the game now, since hard mode was a bit too easy for me. Here's a pro tip for those just starting out. Switch the game speed to the highest it can go, while also using the Macho Momentum modifier. An issue I had when I first started playing was that the charting felt a bit too cluttered, but having the notes move faster meant that there was less visual noise on screen at a time. This made it much easier for me to tell what was going on, and the modifications gave me a much bigger payout, especially if I got a King Crazy. Persona 4 Dancing has a total of 27 tracks for you to play. This setlist consists of songs from the Persona 4 Reincarnation album, songs taken straight from the games, and brand new remixes created specifically for Dancing All Night. These tracks are honestly very well done, with my personal favorites being the remixes of Your Affection, Now I Know, Backside of the TV, and Snowflakes. On top of the already included songs, there are a few bits of DLC offered for you to get some extra mileage out of the game. However, the pricing leaves a bit to be desired. Most songs are priced at $1.50 Canadian a pop, but the tracks that feature new characters and choreography end up costing around $7 each. This is a bit of a tough pill to swallow, since one song costing $7 isn't exactly a good value, but I can see why they're priced like this. It no doubt takes a lot of effort to create a single track for this game. Not only do the songs need to be ordered and charted, but the game uses motion capture for its dances, which is an expensive and time-consuming process. So while it does make sense that these specific songs would cost a premium, as a consumer, it's hard for me to justify spending that money on a single song. However, it's hard to deny that watching Adachi bust a move isn't entertaining. Also, shout out to the Dede Mouse remix of Shadow World. I'm not sure what they were going for here, but it doesn't sound good, and it's completely unsatisfying to play. Thank God it was free, because if it costed money, I would have lost it. As a whole, Persona 4 Dancing is a pretty good game, all things considered. The charting is fun and satisfying, the soundtrack fits the tone and energy perfectly, and there's a decent amount of content to experience. The only problem I have with the gameplay is the issue I mentioned involving fever time. While it can be annoying, it isn't enough to distract from my enjoyment. However, the largest criticism I have with the game is its story, which seems to be a running trend with the Persona spin-off games. There's a lot of ambition behind the story mode, and when just looking at the narrative on paper, there's quite a lot that I enjoy. The themes fall in line with the original Persona 4, and I think that it's pretty ambitious to give a rhythm game a fully fleshed out story. However, it's the writing and pacing that hold it back for me. I might just not be a big fan of visual novels, since I don't think that relying so heavily on inner monologues is good storytelling. All this does is grind the pace to a halt, and you're forced to read mountains of text that ultimately don't mean much in what's going on. However, some part of me looks back on the narrative with a certain level of fondness, because there are quite a few high points for me, but it's not enough for me to want to experience it again anytime soon. Aside from that, Persona 4 Dancing is a solid experience. But we're not quite done just yet. A few years after the release of Dancing All Night, Persona 3 and Persona 5 received rhythm games of their own, the former being Dancing in Moonlight and the latter being Dancing in Star Night. Both games came out the same day and are meant to be complementary titles. They're pretty much the same, just with different tracks based on the respective games. And just to get it right out of the way, I'm not a big fan of these two games. It's no secret that Persona 3 and 5 Dancing are widely considered to be some of the worst titles the series has to offer. This might seem a bit odd on the outside, especially if you compare them to Persona 4 Dancing. How can games so fundamentally similar differ so much in terms of quality? Before I answer that, I believe I should preface this section by mentioning what these two games do well, because there are aspects of these games that I enjoy. The presentation has seen a massive bump in quality. The character models all look great, and the dancing choreography itself is a lot more impressive. The characters in Persona 4 Dancing sometimes felt a bit stiff, since they were glued in place for most of their routines. The choreography in Persona 3 and 5 Dancing sees the characters move around the stage a lot more. This allows them to perform more flashing moves, and the choreography ends up feeling more dynamic because of it. Character customization has also been greatly expanded upon. Not only are there a few more outfits for you to unlock than previously, but you can now also equip up to 3 accessories at a time, with headwear having its own classification. Wigs and colored eye contacts were also added. You can now save your favorite outfits as presets in case you're the kind of person who likes to change their clothing a lot, and if you want to keep your old options on standby. And finally, scratch notes have been adjusted to stand out a lot more visually. Admittedly, it can be kinda hard to see those notes in Persona 4 Dancing sometimes, so having them be a bit more pronounced here is a good improvement. That's genuinely everything that I find to be better here, because other than that, P3 and P5 Dancing are a downgrade in almost every way, like almost to a baffling degree. Let's start with the obvious. Both of these games have a total of 25 songs on disc, while Persona 4 Dancing came with 27 songs. While that might not seem like a huge downgrade at first, when looking beyond a surface level, you'll quickly realize that less effort went into these tracks. There are multiple songs in both of these games that don't feature any sort of choreography, and are instead music videos comprised of clips from their respective games. Compare this to Persona 4 Dancing. Aside from the credits theme, every song had unique choreography and its own visual language. You got to dress up the characters in any way you wanted to, and like it or not, this was one of the main draws for the Dancing series. Persona 3 and 5 Dancing both have 7 tracks each that are dedicated to music videos, even going as far as including live performance renditions of songs and the opening movies as a part of that list. It comes off as a lazy way to pad out the setlist due to a lack of budget. I don't mind these songs in the context of being DLC tracks, but I don't think it's too much to ask for all the base game music to be choreographed, especially since its predecessor managed to do that just fine. While we're on the topic of set lists, I want to focus on Persona 5 Dancing really quick. Music is one of the most inherently subjective topics because it all boils down to personal taste. What I might like is what you may find annoying, and vice versa. I say this because I'm personally not a huge fan of most of the remixes in this game. There are a few tracks I'm a big fan of. I like the remix of Wake Up, Get Out There, and the one for The Days When My Mother Was There. But the rest are just downgrades from their original renditions, and honestly don't have the proper energy for a rhythm game. Persona 5 Dancing also suffers from a lack of track variety. The game came out before the releases of Persona 5 Royal and Persona Q2, which means that all of the songs featured are from the original Persona 5. This is honestly a huge missed opportunity. The other two dancing games had the benefit of being able to pull from multiple facets of the Persona series, and P5 Dancing is restricted to only using music from one game. What we end up with are a couple of repeats, and the inclusion of songs that don't work well for this kind of game. In comparison, Persona 3 Dancing does have a healthy selection of songs. Most of the remixes are also top-notch, and I would argue that the game has my favorite overall soundtrack out of all of the dancing games. While I do enjoy the songs, the charting is a completely different story. It can be best described as obnoxious. This mainly stems from the fact that most of the songs have an over-reliance on using scratch notes. This would be fine, but their placements aren't exactly what I would call intuitive, and feel more like a haphazard way to make the game seem more challenging than it actually is. Quite often are there times where these notes are placed seemingly at random and outside of the rhythm of the track. I get that Persona 3's music took a lot of inspiration from hip-hop and rap, but don't you think that this is a little excessive? You really gotta get used to mashing that bumper button when playing on the highest difficulty. However, the biggest issue I take with the gameplay is the change made to the note colors. For some reason or another, the standard tapping note had its color changed from yellow to blue. I know that this might sound like a meaningless nitpick, but it does have an effect on the gameplay. Something that Persona 4 Dancing went out of its way to do was give every note a distinct color. This made everything immediately recognizable, so that even if the charts were a bit cluttered up, you knew exactly what notes were there. This rule also applies to Persona 5 Dancing, so I'm not sure why Persona 3 Dancing is the odd one out. Since tap notes and scratch notes share the same color, it can sometimes be a bit visually overwhelming. This isn't an issue 90% of the time, and it's something that I can get used to, but the occasion when I miss a note because I quite literally couldn't see it was frustrating nonetheless. Because of these issues, I actually find Persona 3 Dancing to be my least favorite of the trilogy. Don't get me wrong, you can easily make the argument that Persona 5 Dancing is worse, but I just find P3 Dancing to be far more annoying to play. All that's left to cover is the story mode, and to be honest, you're not really missing much. I do find the premise to be rather entertaining though. After Elizabeth and the Twin Wardens heard that Margaret's guests managed to defeat a god through dance, they become extremely jealous. Due to this, the sisters challenge each other to a dancing competition in order to prove who has the better guests. The members of Seas and the Phantom Thieves are summoned to the Velvet Room in their dreams to partake in this event, even though none of them have much experience with dancing. However, since this is a dream, the characters can just imagine any dance moves they want, and their bodies will perform them. But once the night is over and the winner is decided, everyone will forget the events that transpired. It's the same excuse that's used in the Persona Q games, so that the story can technically be considered canon, even though they don't mean anything in the grand scheme of the series. Instead of having a dedicated story mode that tells an overarching narrative, what we have instead is a new take on social links. Each character has their own social link, which consists of a total of 8 ranks. In order to unlock more ranks, you'll need to fulfill gameplay requirements, such as dressing up your characters in different clothing and accessories, clearing a certain number of songs across different difficulties, and the list goes on. Every time you view a character's event, you'll earn more cosmetics to dress up the party members in. In order to reach the credits and unlock the last 2 songs, you need to max out nearly every character's social link. I actually quite like this idea on paper. An issue I have with the story mode of Persona 4 Dancing is the cutscene to gameplay ratio. There's a lot of text that you need to read, and it can take upwards of an hour for you to get through the story content just to play a song that only lasts for a few minutes. Gameplay is king for this genre, and the social system is designed in a way to make sure you're always experiencing the game's bread and butter. But in practice, the concept is fumbled. The requirements to unlock social link ranks aren't anything too special, and are something that are meant to be tackled over the course of multiple hours. The issue is that the game doesn't have enough content to match some of these requirements. While you'll reach some of them just through standard play, if you want to unlock all of the social links, you're going to have to grind out songs sooner or later. This makes the entire experience very tedious, and for the love of God, don't play these games back to back like I did. The social link requirements are the exact same between both games. This made fully completing them a slog, since right after I finished Persona 3 Dancing, I jumped into Persona 5 Dancing, only to be met with the same checklists. But how do the social links fare? Well, they're alright, I guess. There are some fun interactions here and there, but they mostly exist as fan service, and don't offer much in terms of meaningful character progression. Overall, it just feels like a pretty big downgrade of the story mode featured in Persona 4 Dancing. While that game had its own fair share of problems, there was at the very least an attempt to do something interesting with the premise. There were tangible themes that reflected ideas present in the original Persona 4, and part of me hoped that these two games would get the same treatment. I don't enjoy fan service just for the sake of it, and prefer my narratives to have a reason for existing beyond that. I get that the story mode isn't at the forefront of these games like it was for P4 Dancing, but if we're going to ignore it, we're not exactly left with a lot of content here. So yeah, that was the Persona Dancing series. Talk about a mixed bag of quality. I really do enjoy Dancing All Night, not because I'm biased towards Persona 4, but because I genuinely think that it's a very solid game. There's a good amount of content for you to experience, the story mode is surprisingly decent, albeit flawed, and it's got a killer soundtrack that lends itself well for this style of game. I've sunk in plenty of hours trying to get King Crazy ranks, not just for the sake of this review, but because it's pretty addicting to do so. In comparison, Persona 3 and 5 Dancing are a huge downgrade in almost every way. Yes, some improvements were made to the minor aspects of the experience, but it doesn't make up in the areas where they falter, such as in their underwhelming set lists, bad note charting, tedious progression, and lack of meaningful content. These two games feel like products rushed out to capitalize on the recent success of Persona 5 rather than be projects made out of passion. I know that at the end of the day, these games were made to generate sales, but Persona 4 Dancing still manages to feel like a complete package with a lot of heart put into it. In contrast, the sequels feel empty and exist solely as platforms to try to squeeze as much money out of the player base as possible. They serve as a perfect example of what happens when greed overtakes making a quality product, which is a shame because that first game held so much potential, and I would have loved to have seen what a proper follow-up would look like. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'd like to give a special shout out to all of my channel supporters whose names are on screen now. It's because of these lovely people that I'm able to make videos at the pace I do currently. These videos take a while to make, so if you're at all interested in helping out and donating, you can do so through my Patreon or channel memberships. I have a few things I can offer in return, such as early video access, a special Discord role, and even some behind the scenes content on occasion. Every donation helps, and if these rewards sound interesting to you, then you can find out more by following the links in the description. We're pretty close to the end of the Persona retrospective. All that's left for me to cover is Persona Q2, a game that I have yet to try out. I wasn't exactly a fan of the first game, but I've heard that this one is better from a few comments that I've read. I don't know when I'll be getting around to it since I have a few other videos planned ahead of schedule, such as the analysis for Digital Devil Saga 2. I've also been kicking around the idea of covering the Devil May Cry games eventually, since if you didn't already know, I'm a huge fan of them, and I've been on a bit of an action game kick in my free time. Expect to see that come out sometime soon. If you want to stay up to date with upcoming videos, then I encourage you to follow my Twitter and join my Discord server. Both will be linked in the description. Once again, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.